Flash episode 17, Tricksters. Um, I thought initially, like, okay, the timeline stuff that we had, I thought that was gonna throw us for a loop. Like, holy crap, he went back in time, he changed everything up. We saw Cisco die in an alternate timeline. Barry and Iris, didn't really get together, but Iris admitted how she felt, and then she found out that Barry was Flash. And Barry shoots back in time, and then there's an alternate timeline with the rogues and all that stuff. I thought that was gonna throw me for a loop, and then God, we get this episode, and it's like, okay, the beginning was super cool. They're fighting and stuff, and it's like in slow motion. They're running around the room and things like that. And then the Reverse Flash, Flash saves himself as a kid, and Reverse Flash is running away down the street. He falls and stuff, and he talks to Gideon and stuff. It's like, you can't get back. Your cells are basically depleted and everything. And he takes off his mask, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And like the whole thing, I was just like I knew what it had to be. Like, once they showed that that guy was some random dude, I'm like, okay, well, 15 years, he didn't just suddenly start looking like this, so it's not the same person. I thought that, I figured what had happened was that he, somehow Elbar Thawne and Harrison Wells ended up fusing together in a similar, way to, Firestorm. I thought, somehow that happened, and, Elbar Thawne's, I don't know. I just figured that's how it was. It wasn't exactly the same thing where it's like Ronnie's body and then Dr. Stein's brain. But, Eobard Thawne took over. He had like a perfected version or something, and he was in control. So he took over Harrison Wells' body in order to look like him, but he had his own brain and stuff like that. And so they go through it. It's like, okay, we have Harrison Wells and we have Tess Morgan, and they're talking and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, there's this random guy who's obviously the Reverse Flash. It's like this random dude. Then we have Harrison Wells and Tess Morgan, and they're talking about Star Labs and, Tess/Star Labs. And, they're talking about this and that, and then they're in the car and driving. And they get into the car crash. She dies, instantly. And then he uses this crazy looking thing. It was basically like an IV, like what they use for IV. That's what it looked like, where it had the little pads on the side and then just one little needle. Except it was obviously insane technology that would convert your physical features into someone else's, and he kills Harrison Wells off and takes over his body. I didn't see that coming. I figured they fused together. I didn't think he was actually gone. I thought maybe they could find some way and they split him up or something like Firestorm. But he kills Harrison Wells. I'm assuming his body is gone. And oh man, I just thought about this because they had that really cool trailer at the end of the episode, which I'd seen that before, and that was a trailer I believe I mentioned. They have one for that and one for Arrow, where they kind of spoil a couple of little things. It's like, here's some really big plot points that are going to happen in the season. And initially I thought that the dead body may have been Simon Stagg when he disappeared. And now that I think about it, it makes way more sense that it would actually be the real Harrison Wells, because he was killed 15 years ago, so his body would decay, and of course he was basically drained to the point of being bones anyway during that scene, which is actually kind of gross. I was surprised with the way they did that, because they normally don't do stuff that actually looks kind of visceral like that. And he's getting sucked away, and his skin is basically shriveling up to the point where it doesn't exist, and it's just down to the meat and bones. But if that's Harrison Wells that they showed in that trailer, then I don't know what to expect. That's going to be crazy. And then the scene right after that, they actually had Barry inside of the little room that, I feel like I can't even call him Wells at all anymore. He's not Harrison Wells in any respect. It's not even his alias. It's just a fake version of Harrison Wells' body. But, Barry was in that room that he's been in where he checks the future. I was going to say history, but the future history or whatever, however you would describe that. And, the whole thing was just an insane twist. I didn't know how that was going to work, but it was definitely cool to see. I loved how they did that. And, if that was Harrison Wells' body buried there, then there is going to be a lot to happen. Are they going to figure that out in this season, and then they stop him, and it's it's Eobard Thawne, and maybe that outs superheroes in general, because if this guy disappears, it's gonna be big news. It's not like this guy can just, up and vanish. Granted, I guess he could. I mean, if they kept Star Labs running without him, no one would really know that he kind of disappeared on his own. But like, I don't know. Like, it was just really cool. Like, it was an amazing little twist how they did that, and it was done. Like, I guess I was sort of right where they did fuse together, but not really, because obviously they didn't fuse. The actual Harrison Wells is flat out dead, and it's just interesting. And I don't know what changes to the future may or may not happen because of what Eobard has done. But he mentioned that they could accomplish that in the year 2020. That's when the particle accelerator happened, and so that means that that's when Barry became the Flash, not 5 years ahead of time, or I guess 4 years, depending on how they or 6 years, sorry, depending on how they do the actual years inside the series. But it was very cool. Like, I loved that. Like, I thought that was a great way to have it, where this is why this character is Eobard. This is how he basically lives like this. Like, I was trying to figure that out for a long time. Like, how is it that he goes back in time to basically kill Barry's mother, and it's only 15 years. Like, I know he might know a lot of stuff about the future, but you can't just instantly gain all this popularity and all this tech and things like that just in 15 years. And I guess considering the difference in time, he would have to remember so much stuff in order to just like randomly get rich. Like, oh yeah, plays like a billion bets. Like, he remembers every little stupid detail in order to get a ton of money to make Star Labs. But now it makes perfect sense, and that explains why it wasn't Harrison Wells' DNA. It was Eobard Thawne's DNA, and Harrison Wells' DNA is now, I guess, inside of Eobard Thawne. I guess when he took over his visual look, he took over everything about him. I mean, he drained the guy like it was, sorry if you don't get this reference, but he drained him like it was some Dragon Ball Z type stuff. And, he drains him and takes all of his, like, cells and every component and facet of his DNA. And that's why, he wasn't able to, they weren't able to link the DNA when they were going through the scene at Barry's old house. And it was just great. It made perfect sense, and it kind of answered those questions. Like, this is how they weren't able to match the DNA. This is, this is exactly how he got all the money, how he got the prestige and all that stuff, because he really just took over someone else's, world. Like, he took over this guy's world. He killed off the one person who would probably notice that he's different. And, that's pretty much all there was to it. He was like, this is great, like, this is my opportunity, and that's how he did it. So that was definitely something crazy. Like, I love that. And then he kind of outed himself at the end with Barry for the first time phasing. Like, when they were even talking about it, I was like losing my mind. I was thinking I should honestly do like live reactions, because I'm always like jumping around the room when he does something, like the next move. And I was thinking, like, I think 10 minutes before he did it, I was like, I can't wait till he phases through something, because that's always been my favorite move by the Flash, where he runs through stuff. And I wasn't sure how they were going to do that in this episode. I didn't even think about it, but it made perfect sense. Like, he got the little thing on his arm, and it was actually very similar to, I believe it was Justice League Doom was the animated film, and it was very similar to that, where Flash had something on his arm, and that's what he had to do. Basically, he couldn't he couldn't slow down to a certain speed. He had to keep going, and that was, sorry to spoil that, but that's kind of how he got out of it. He phased through something, and it was so cool to see that. And it was a truck instead of a building, which I think made it cooler, because if he went through a building, it would have been like, alright, he went straight through, and then that was all we get to see. But we got to see him like run through this truck, and like you could see like where he was inside the truck, and it was like warping and stuff like that, and then he steps on the other side of it, and it was just an insane scene. Like, it was so cool, and it was like my favorite thing. And I don't know if he'll be able to just instantly replicate that, because it is something that he has to learn. Like, he went back in time, and that was just him just running at sheer speeds to save the city, to create like the wall of air. And in this moment, he actually kind of trained, and he was sort of able to do it, where it's like, okay, yeah, he was listening to what Thawne was saying, and it's like he got that feeling, and he was able to he was able to really think about it and go through, and that's how he did it. But it doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, he'll be able to do it over and over again, he doesn't have exact, precise, 100% control of it. So I don't know if we're going to get to see that a bunch of different times, and I would love to see it that way. Or maybe every once in a while or something where it's like he practices that specific move because he knows, like, if I can dodge a bullet or something, then, or, just shake really fast and it just shoots right through me, that's not too bad. Like, that's not a bad move. So I'm hoping we get to see a lot more of that because it would definitely be exciting. I have to close this because it's getting incredibly bright. I know it was like super bright for a long time, but sorry about that. But I hope we get to see that move because I think it was definitely, like I said, it was my favorite thing that Barry's done, aside from time travel, because you can't hate time travel. It's really awesome. But that's always been like my favorite thing where he just like phases through stuff. I remember, I can't remember what Batman show it was. I don't think it was the animated series. It may have been though. And I think that was the first time I ever saw Flash phase through stuff. And he was just running around Gotham City and he ran into the Batcave and was like, yeah, I found it. I was just running around. I just phased through stuff. I shift my molecules and I phased through walls. And I was like, I didn't know that was the thing. And ever since then, it was like, this is the best move I've ever seen in my life. So it was incredibly exciting to finally see that move in this series. And I was just waiting for it. I think the first time we got like a little hint of it was when we saw Flash versus Arrow. And Barry got hit with like the knockout gas, but he was shaking fast enough to where the gas kind of came out of him. Or he basically shook to the point where it turned into gas and shifted out of his body. I think that was the closest we've come to him phasing through something up to the point where he actually did it this episode. So that was definitely amazing. I love that. Of course, the villain in this episode, we got the Trickster, who is played by Mark Hamill, who actually reprised his role from the original Flash series, and that was definitely pretty cool. We got to see him come back, and it was so weird seeing Mark Hamill do a live action because for anyone who somehow doesn't already know this, Mark Hamill plays the Joker. Like he was the voice of the Joker in Batman the Animated Series. He's the voice of the Joker in the Arkham games, or at least the first two Arkham games. It was a different guy for Arkham Origins, but he was the Joker. Like, aside from Luke Skywalker, which I think most people know him as, it's like, oh, it's Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill was the Joker, and he's actually done a lot of other characters too. He was like, if you watched Avatar, The Last Airbender, he was the Fire Lord. He was also like a monkey in like one random episode in the spirit realm and stuff. But he does a lot of voice acting stuff, and he was the Joker. So it was kind of funny, him playing the Trickster, being similar to the Joker. I was kind of waiting to see how far they would push it with the laughter and how far he would go with like the signature Joker laugh. And he doesn't get to that point, which I think they kind of did on purpose because they didn't want people who, like me, who probably knew he was the Joker, to relate it too much. It's hard not to though, because for one, he's playing a character very similar to the Joker. He's called the Trickster. He does similar stuff where he wants to kill people using like, over the top things and stuff like that. So it's very similar to the Joker, but it's the Trickster, and then of course they use Mark Hamill, who always played the Joker. But it was just kind of cool. It was cool to watch that. I liked the character that he played and just how crazy he was, and how the guy who was actually taking his position was actually his son, and he was working with him, and it was like the biggest trick of all. And I thought that was definitely pretty nice. And he kidnaps Barry's dad, Henry, and for anyone who didn't know, the guy who plays Barry's dad actually played the Flash in the original Flash series as well. So the two of them kind of reunited in this episode, and it was just really cool. And we got to see Barry officially reveal himself to his dad, which was a nice little scene where he's like, he gets saved, and he's like, you always look good in red and stuff. I like that scene. And another crazy reveal that I didn't see coming was Barry revealing himself to Eddie, which I was completely surprised by. I was so shocked by that, but it was very cool. I'm definitely excited to see where the heck that goes, and I'm so glad they showed the trailer because I didn't want to talk about it because it had a lot of sort of spoiler moments. But now that they've officially shown it, and if you haven't seen it, you can kind of skip over this part. But the stuff that with them having Eddie know that Barry is the Flash now, the scene in the trailer makes it even crazier when Eddie's like, he shoots those two cops, and I don't know if it's mind control or anything like that, and I believe I did mention that before, so sorry if that kind of spoiled it for you back then. But he shoots the two cops, and with him knowing who Barry is, whether he's actually gone evil, which I highly doubt, or he is, being mind controlled by someone, him knowing that Barry's the Flash is very risky. Like, anyone being taken over, mind controlled, or even kidnapped, like in Cisco's case, when he gets kidnapped, he ends up telling the rogues who Barry is because he has to save his brother. So, in a mind control situation, it's the same thing. Probably worse because, he goes straight to the source, and this, whoever this random person would be, doesn't have the same skill set. Like, if it is mind control, they have mind control powers. It's not just like, oh, it's the rogues who have an ice gun, a fire gun, and a gold gun. This is someone who actually has mind control powers. It's a little bit more deadly, so I'm excited to see where that stuff goes. And they had the scene with Joe and Gorilla Grodd, which I don't know how that came about. I have to assume, based on what we saw before, with Clancy Brown, who's General Eiling, I couldn't think of the character's name, but we saw him get taken to Gorilla Grodd because Eobard Thawne kind of went back and was like, he took him down into the sewers, and that's where he was. I have to assume that's what happened to Joe, where Thawne realized he knows my secret, or maybe multiple people do, because like I said, they had Barry in the room and everything, so he's gonna be outed, and he's gonna realize that he's been outed. So I can't wait to see how all that stuff plays out, why it plays out the way it does, and just everything that's gonna happen. And they had an epic little scene with like Firestorm, the Flash, and Arrow. Even more crossovers like this stuff with Joe and Lance when they find the dead body, and Laurel and Cisco and stuff. So I can't wait to see that crossover happen, because it seems like it's going to be really freaking sweet, and more action. Ray comes into the Flash, which was also in the other trailer. Like, there's a longer version of that trailer, so you can easily find it on YouTube. I think it's the Paley Fest trailer for both Flash and Arrow. They each have their own. So definitely check those out if you don't mind some spoilers and stuff, because I don't know if the last Arrow episode, because I missed the last one, I don't know if they showed part of that trailer or anything, but that one, very similar to the Flash one, has some spoilers and stuff, so just in case, be a little bit careful before you check it out. You might see some stuff you didn't want to know anything about, so just as a warning, be careful before you check out the full versions of the trailers. But great episode. Eddie finds out Barry's the Flash. That's going to be great to see. We got the Trickster, who is pretty cool. Barry phasing through stuff, just like straight up nerdgasm. Like, I was just like, I think I just had an orgasm. I was just watching, like, it's the sweetest thing. It's just so cool. So I'm excited to see how all this stuff plays out. Eobard Thawne being a completely different person, like them showing exactly how Eobard Thawne is Harrison Wells, how he has this alias, and how it makes sense within the world, and how people know this guy and have known him for such a long time in the field of genetics and science and research and things like that, and how he was able to basically take his position. It just made perfect sense. I love the way they were able to explain it, and it was just really cool. I love the slow motion fight scene in the beginning. It was super CG, of course. I'm sure some people probably had issues with that, but I thought it was cool because we've never really been able to see that. Like, even when Barry did go up against the Reverse Flash, I think there may have been like 1 or 2 slow motion scenes or something like that, but they're like, it was even cooler because they were in an enclosed space, so they were like running in circles and like going up and down the walls and stuff. So it was definitely a great little opening scene. I loved it. I think this episode was just great. Like, it was definitely, like I said, I thought alternate timeline stuff was going to hit me for a loop, and then this comes on. It's like, yep, this is who, this is Eobard Thawne. This is how he becomes Harrison Wells. And, just Barry knowing that he is the Reverse Flash based on how he described the feeling and stuff. And I thought, honestly, with the way he was describing it, I'm like, the people in the room, I thought they were going to realize it, like Caitlin and Cisco and Joe. I thought they would kind of realize it. Like, he's oddly, he's so descriptive. He's so intense. Like, he took his glasses off and everything, and his eyes, like, dilated and all that stuff. And I thought that was actually really funny how they did that. It made it really intense. But it was definitely a great episode. Of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this one, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And with the reveal of Barry as the Flash to Eddie. How do you guys think that's gonna play out for the rest of the series, or really even just the season? Like I said, with him either being mind controlled or completely turning evil, which I seriously doubt. If he just flat out turns evil, there'll be a huge twist to me that he just went bad and then just started killing cops and stuff. But with the reveal that they have, for Eddie finding out that Barry's the Flash and him deciding to help them take on Harrison Wells, how do you guys think that's going to play out? Not just for Eddie himself, but for like the entire series, because Eddie's like an interesting catalyst for the show, where it's like obviously he's in this sort of love triangle with Barry and Iris, but he is the ancestor to Eobard Thawne, and he can't be killed. Like if Eddie's dead, then Eobard Thawne doesn't exist. So he knows he can't take this guy out. He can't kill him like he could kill Simon Stagg, or like he could kill Iris's partner. That stuff doesn't work because he wants to exist, obviously. So he's got like a very interesting position as, just like the love triangle portion, as well as you're kind of the reason for, this future villain and whoever he ends up dating, because obviously it's not going to end up being Iris, because Barry and Iris get together in the comics, unless they change that, which I doubt. But, I can't wait to see how that plays out. But I want to know what you guys think about it, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.